Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the FordTechMakuloco channel. Today we're going to show you how to change out your molded lead frame on your 2011 and newer 6R80 transmission. Now, this transmission was found in the F-150, Expedition, Lincoln Navigator, and of course the Ford Mustang. This does not apply to the 09 and 10 6R80 transmissions, which had a different setup. It was a molded lead frame with TCM combined into one. So those ones did not have an issue. They went to this more simplistic design in 2011, and that's when all the issues started. So the issues that are common with this molded lead frame is the transmit range sensor on here can fail at times, causing a no crank, no start situation. There was a lot of issues with solenoid DTCs because the strip right here, where all the solenoids plug into the molded lead frame, I would collect all kinds of metal debris inside the transmission, and it was short across those terminals on there. So this new one comes with this foam strip, which keeps all those metal contaminants out of there. And then, of course, as you guys probably already know, these had a real issue with the output shaft speed sensor, causing an issue with the vehicle's rear end locking up. So basically, you're driving down the road 50, 60 miles an hour, it's reading, and then all of a sudden drops to zero. PCM doesn't know any better. It just says we're down to zero. We should be in first gear at 0 miles an hour, and it shifts the vehicle into first gear while you're cruising on the highway. Yeah, so it can be pretty darn dangerous when the back end locks up on you going on the highway, even dry. But imagine it being raining out, a little slick out from ice maybe, and some snow. Yeah, it can get real dangerous real quick. Now, I have a whole video on all the recalls, the Band-Aid recalls associated with this molded lead frame. Basically, Ford did anything they could to avoid shelling out the money for the labor and the part to replace this and fix them properly. So today we're going to walk you through how to change it out and fix your transmission properly. Even preemptively, I recommend to do this because there's a lot of other fixes we're going to do today while the valve body's out of there, okay? So not only are we going to put in the latest and greatest molded lead frame, which includes everything you see here, all molded into one, we're also going to take care of the solenoid DTC issue with this foam strip. We're, of course, going to change fluid and filter, so that's all new in there. We're going to change the coastal sleeve or bulkhead sleeve, which is another common fluid leak point. And then there's also another rectangle seal pass-through seal that for the main pump in there, which likes to crack. So we're going to change all of that out today while the valve body is down to make your 6R80 transmission and this 6R80 transmission the most reliable it can be. Let's get to it. Here we go. Let's get the pan dropped so we can start draining the fluid. Now, once the vehicle is on a nice level surface, wheels chocked, and we're safe to work underneath it, we can go ahead and start actually draining the fluid out and walk away for a while, and then we'll come back and start pulling down some components. Before you do that, you want to loosen this plug right here. It's our fill plug, and it's a 19mm hex on there. You want to loosen that and get it out of there so it relieves the vacuum inside the trans, okay? That'll make pulling the pan down much easier. Before you do that, you want to get in here with the air hose, if you have it, and start really cleaning out around the plug and the gasket surface itself. Now, once the area is clean, what I do is I take a box end of a 19mm combo wrench, get it on the hex there, some wire, so we can get up in here and break torque on that. And then I just use a hammer like this, get the torque broken, like so. And then you can use the open end, turn a little bit, and listen. You hear that? And that's the vacuum inside the trans. For some reason, the 6R60, 6R80 transmissions have a vacuum in there. So you want to make sure you get this thing out of here. Pull our dipstick out. Be careful. These are easy to break. Very, very easy to break. Get them out of here. Off to the side. Now at this point, we're ready to drop the pan. What you want to do is start loosening all these bolts from the center in the back here, all the way up to the center here. And then we're going to start loosening these. I remove all of these, and we're going to leave this one and the one on the other side in. And then we're going to slowly loosen these so the back end of the pan here can drop and start filling our drain pan here. That way it's a more controlled draining of the fluid out here, because it's going to be a big waterfall and a big mess if you don't do it this way. So make sure you go like this. Get all these out, it'll start drizzling. Then we'll get all these out, and then we'll do these ones last. We'll loosen them just a little at a time. This will just drop, and it'll fill our pan in a controlled manner. And there it is. All the bolts are out except for this one and the one on the other side. And then I turn them out, you know, a half turn, full turn by hand, so we can get that controlled drain. And it's all going right into the pan this way, the drain pan. And the other big thing is you want to, you know, do it evenly side to side, or else it's just gonna spray out on one side. There we go. See that? You see how we're controlling the draining process on here? Usually drains out around 7.5 quarts initially, so that's a lot of fluid to put on the ground. So this is the way to do it. I have few people ask me why don't you just do it this way and drain it and drop it this way? Well, the reason being is that all the fluid is naturally going that way, and the whole engine and trans are at an angle facing that way, so you want to drain it down here and do it that way. Only makes sense. It does make a slight mess in the cross member and the exhaust. It burns off in the first few minutes and you're done. So at this point, drained out quite a bit, so we'll just back these out a few turns on here. You know, get them nice and loose, let the back end there drop. And it'll drop down onto the exhaust over there. And that's the shallow side of the pan too. So that'll take all the fluid from this side and bring it out to the shallow end. And get it out of here. Here's a better vantage point for this next step. What we're going to do now that most of the fluid is drained is we're going to take out these two bolts while holding and supporting the pan, and then we're actually going to drop it down and tilt it a little bit, come forward, clear the exhaust, and then drop it down. It's a process. There's quite a bit of fluid still in this sump right here, and the fluid filter on these is so huge and heavy, it's going to fall out, plop, and put fluid everywhere. So be ready for that too. Take my jacket off, be ready. So what you're going to do is you're going to get the side you can't see very well. Get that bolt out of here. Drop it over here. Same thing. Drop it, get your tool out of the way. And then we're going to bring it down. Okay, move your drain pan up a little bit now. Hopefully you guys can still see this. The pan, the filter is dropping. So I might as well drop it manually. Come down, see this? Drain it. Drain a little bit. Then level back out and bring it down to our drain pan. Nice and level like that. And that way, there's not a huge mess. Hopefully you guys saw all that. Let me bring it down to the pan here. Get some better lighting, don't worry. I'll show you. So you guys can see, if I lighten that a little bit. There's the filter. You can see it's freaking huge. Look how dirty that fluid is. 60,000 miles on the button. Real dirty. That's why I say change this fluid and filter every 60,000 or sooner. So we'll pull our gasket off. We're going to wipe it down and clean it and reuse it. It is reusable, as most Ford gaskets are. They're trans pan gaskets. And then we're going to dump our fluid. and get our pan dumped out. Now at this point, what you want to do is look inside your pan for any weird chunks of metal, you know, steel, aluminum, or brass, to see if there's any internal engine or transmission damage. And I don't really see anything in here. I see some rubber pieces over here, which is interesting. There should be nothing like this in here, but there's a few places I think those are coming from, and we're going to change those seals out today too while we're in here. So that's why it's always a good idea to look around your pan when you drop it, see what's going on inside the transmission in the last 60,000 miles, what's coming apart in there, okay? All right, so at this point, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna let this drain for a while. Drip drain. We can concentrate on the coastal sleeve or bulkhead sleeve on the back side here. It's an electrical pass-through sleeve. We'll go ahead and get that out while this is dripping down into the pan here. And then we'll go for the valve body itself next. At this point, the transmission is gonna drip out and drain out for a while. It's been a pretty consistent drip like this. So in order to avoid a shower of trans fluid, we can go ahead and concentrate on other areas like cleaning up the gasket, tossing the filter, cleaning up the pan. And on these models, there is a transmission pass-through sleeve right there that we can go ahead, reach up in here. Okay, we're gonna flick the lever up and pull the harness out of the way, okay? And then we need to work on getting this sleeve out of here. So we can do all of that while the transmission is draining. Next, we're going to remove the bulkhead sleeve. You can see it right there. Now the way that locks into the molded lead frame and valve body is by this locking lever right here. Now the way you release the locking lever to pull it down is you simply get in here with a tool or your finger, okay? And we're gonna push this little lock right here this way and then just pull down, okay? And that'll release the actual sleeve from the lock. And then you get you up in here. A lot of times you can get up in here and just kind of wiggle and pull it out. Ooh. Oh, there we go. And the whole thing comes out like that. If not, you can always use something like this, like a cat's claw, and just kind of pry it and it will come right out of there. Now these are prone to leaking if you didn't know it already, so it's best just go ahead and replace the sleeve and all the O-rings that come as a package and make it all new so there's no problems in the future. Now at this point, we are ready to start unbolting the valve body so we can go ahead and bring it to the bench and swap that molded lead frame over. All right, now comes the tricky part. When we're pulling this valve body down, it's big, it's heavy, you don't want to touch the solenoid, stuff like that. There's only 11 bolts we need to pull and the whole thing comes down, not 18, not 24 like some of the Ford valve bodies. But there's gonna be a lot of things falling out. There's gonna be some transfer tubes be falling out of there. The thermostatic bypass valve's definitely gonna fall out. You don't want that to hit the ground and break. Your transfer seal might fall out. A lot of stuff. So be ready for it. Be supportive of it. Now the bolts, I will link to the actual picture where all the bolts are at. But you can just look at it. You can tell, like the head of the bolt. The actual head is thicker and it's wider. So there's one right there. I could tell one right there, one right there. There. There's another one over here. I think it's right there. There's 3 back here. And it'll basically come out. You can tell the heads are bigger. It's very obvious. So you guys can just follow along on here or print out or just look at the heads. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna loosen this one right here just a little bit. Okay, so it's loose like that. And that'll support the valve body while we're pulling the rest of these bolts. And these bolts go all the way through to the case. So they should be long, like that. Okay? I'm gonna get the ones in the back here. These are gonna be shorter. They're just bolting up the lead frame to the case. There's 3 of them back here behind the solenoids. You guys will see them. Ooh. All right, so this one's loose. This is another big boy, big head on there. This one. This one. And the other thing to look out for, which you're probably already noticing, is that the draining of the transmission is not over. Once this comes out, there's going to be a lot of passages in the trans that are going to bleed out, so it's going to be another waterfall. So have your drain pan ready. Here's another one. Now it's really starting to drop. Here's this one. Oh, here we go. Like I said, watch out. I'll try to go around this one. Woo! Knocked you guys there. Yeah, see, it's draining out pretty good. So don't be impatient. Just let it drain out. It's cool. No problem. At this point, we have 10 bolts out, and then this one is loose. So we should be able to flop this thing around. If we were to loosen this one just a little bit, okay, this whole thing, whole thing should flop around. Okay, so there's just the one bolt left. See how it holds it for us while it drains out? Makes it so much easier. These are things you learn after doing trans work for so long. It makes life easier. So I'm gonna give it a minute or two to let it drain out. It's draining quite a bit. You guys can't really see it, but it's draining quite a bit. Let's go ahead and remove that last bolt. What you want to do is support the valve body evenly. It's gonna be heavy. Let everything else drop. And then concentrate on supporting the valve body. Yep. Down and out. Now once the valve body is down and out of the way and secure, you need to find this valve right here. When you pull the valve body down, I guarantee it, the thing fell out of the case of the transmission. Make sure you have the valve and the spring. Make sure it's not damaged, and make sure it's cleaned up, and put it off to the side in the transmission pan so we know to put it back in later on. That goes right here in the case, so you need to make sure you put that in going back together. Now what this valve does is it's a thermal bypass valve that doesn't allow cooler flow, any of the trans fluid to go through the transmission cooler until the transmission heats up. Okay, it's all part of emissions. They want to get it warmed up as soon as possible so it can go to a different strategy, which is better for fuel economy. Okay, so try to warm up the transmission as fast as possible. Well, in the meantime, unless the transmission is really nice and hot, nothing's flowing through the cooler. So when you go to a trans shop or a dealership and they're trying to sell you a trans flush saying it's going to fix your trans, well, guess what? Nothing's going to pass through the trans because this little valve is going to block it. So they're going to put 14 quarts through the trans cooler tubes and the trans cooler itself, nothing through the trans. So don't get scammed by the dealerships or the trans shops that don't know what they're doing with this transmission. It is unique. The other thing to look out for is these transfer tubes right here. They're different lengths, they're different sizes, they're different colors. Make sure they're still in the case. Now you may have 3 or you may have 4 depending on your build date. I think the late builds are 3, and then the early builds are 4 like this, 4 transfer tubes. Also, this right here is another transfer seal right here for the torque converter and the front pump and all that. You want to take this down and replace it every time you're in here. Okay, a lot of times, you know, from the factory, these ones were made differently and they like to crack, and then they cause delayed engagement issues. So you want to change it while you're in here. Besides that, just let the transmission drip and drain out. You can start cleaning some of these surfaces like this, like up in here for the sleeve. Wipe down some of this in here. Make sure it's nice and clean. Going back together. Over here on the bench, with our valve body cleaned up a little bit and drained out, we can go ahead and start removing the molded lead frame from the valve body itself. It's a pretty simple procedure, 6 bolts total. There's 2 here, two here, and then two here. And that'll separate the two from each other. Let's go ahead and pull those out. They're T27s. And they're all the same length. And then we'll go ahead and we'll take this whole thing, we'll flip it back over, as you see here. And then once the valve body is flipped over like this, the molded lead frame simply lifts straight up and off of here. Over here is where it's going to bind, where it's actually pinned into each one of those solenoids on there. So let's go ahead and kind of wiggle this off of here. Like I said, you want to concentrate over here where all your solenoids are pinned in. Right there. And then after that, it'll basically lift right off of here. All right, there it is. All right, now, once that's out of the way, you can see there's some dirty fluid in here. You can leave it or you can wipe it off. It really doesn't matter, to tell you the truth. I mean, the whole thing's just soaked in fluid and sitting in a bath of fluid the whole time it's in the transmission. But I like to get some of it off there, especially in these sealing points, you know, right here, stuff like that. Just kind of check the overall condition of it. The one thing I stress you don't want to do when you're cleaning is to touch any of these terminals on the solenoids here. Don't touch them. It's a big no-no for static discharge reasons. They're very, very sensitive, so you don't want to ruin your solenoids on this transmission. They're very expensive. All right, so let's talk about the new molded lead frame. Of course, all the electronics that are inside of it are new, latest and greatest, made to not drop out or be faulty, of course. But you'll also get this little extra foam strip inside of here, okay? It's going to come in the kit. And you want to use this because they're having a lot of issues with these terminals shorting out on here to each other with all the metal that's floating around these transmissions from regular wear and tear, okay? On the new transmissions, 2015 and newer, 6R80 still, they're actually using two trans pan magnets to catch all these debris because it is such an issue with electrical codes for these solenoids or them just acting funky because they're cross-shorting in here. So there's two fixes. There is a dual magnet setup on the new vehicles, and then there's this foam strip. And the foam strip is made to go between the plastic here and the solenoid, so it'll keep anything from entering, any kind of metal from entering inside that connector on there and shorting it out. So it's very simple. It just kind of, it's all cut and made real nice on here. And it just simply lays in here. So make sure it's laying in there all the way across. Okay, and it'll stay in place while you flip it over and insert into the solenoids. Now, this is the reason why I had a couple of videos about maintaining the fluid in this transmission. It's very sensitive. It's solenoid driven. There's no bands. And there's no servos. It's all solenoid driven. So it's very sensitive to any kind of metal in the inside there and any kind of contamination. And now, how many years later, Ford is taking note of that with these foam seals and the dual magnets and stuff like that. And that's why I stress consistent trans fluid change intervals. You want to change that trans fluid and filter every 60,000 miles. Drop the pan, clean the pan out, clean the magnets off, wipe everything down, let it have an extended drain. That is the way to do it with this transmission, and you can see why. They're having a real issue with those on these transmissions. So we're simply going to take this, we're going to flip it over, and we're going to make sure we spline up with all these solenoids over here, but also on this side, you'll notice there's a little nub sticking out of the trans range sensor, okay? You need to make sure that's right here in between these two lands on here. So just line it up as you're dropping it down on there because this thing most likely moved. So all these solenoids should be facing up. There are alignment pins in here, so it's going to help you align it perfectly. So it's falling right in right now. Everything looks good and it's aligned. Now we're aligning the trans range sensor. And it looks good. So then we're going to come down here and we're going to push and wiggle. Okay. We're going to get this guy dropping too. It is a tight fit. And you want to get these kind of going down together. Okay, it's pretty even now. Now we're going to concentrate on the connector over here. Don't forget this side. Don't forget to make sure it's locked into there. I'll show a close-up how that should look. Everything looks good over here. Over here, what I'll do is I'll kind of squeeze these. Just make sure they're definitely in there. There we go. I'll flip it on its side and do the same thing over here. There's a lot of solenoids in here that you got to spline with, so it needs to be in there just right. Let's give you a close-up of this trans range sensor right here. So you can see, hopefully, how it's splined in there. That little nub is splined with the manual valve on there. That's all you got to do with that. It's good to go. Everything's attached on here. Everything looks good. So you can go ahead and flip back over, just like this. And then we'll start putting these screws back in here. Everything should be lined up right now. So these should just kind of thread in by hand, no sweat. And we're going to tighten these evenly to kind of suck that molded lead frame to the valve body. And right there, right? Right. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and we'll just snug it down. I'll start over here. Over here. And we'll recheck it over here to make sure everything's okay. Everything's splined in even all the way across. Good to go. We're still pinned in right here. Okay. Put it back down. Finally, we'll go ahead and we'll torque down these 6 bolts to 53 inch-pounds. So what I'll do is I'll just start over here and just kind of jump around. Torque it. Concentrate on this side first by the solenoids. And I always recheck torque on these. Anything to do with transmission work, internal engine work, stuff like that. It's a good habit to get in the habit of. So they're all torqued. Like I said, I'll just go over them again. Make sure it's set into place. Check these real quick. All right. So, at this point, we're done. We're done with this part of it. So, everything looks good to go on here. We're locked in with our manual valve on here. Everything's good to go. We're snapped in over here. We're torqued down. We can go ahead and start putting it back into the vehicle. When installing the valve body back into the transmission case, what you want to do is a few pre-checks before you just bolt it up. So we're going to make sure all these transfer tubes are still in here. They didn't fall out, okay? They're all in place. And then we're going to kind of, wipe the case a little bit, make sure you don't leave any lint behind or chunks of the rag. Just kind of clean it up wipe it off, okay? All this, these sealing surfaces over here where your transfer seal goes, we're gonna wipe that down. It's probably leaking still on yours. And then even the hole for your transmission filter, and make sure that's nice and dry. Just stuff like that, okay? Check the overall condition, especially this hole right here, this one right here for that thermal bypass valve, because we're gonna have to kind of stick that up in there and make sure it holds while we're putting the transmission valve body back up. So that's why it gets a little bit tricky. So if it's clean and it's dry, it makes it easier to keep it up in there, like so. All right, at this point, everything looks good to go. We'll install our new transfer seal. It simply clips into place and just kind of holds there while you're installing the valve body. It won't fall out, no problem with that. Besides that, we're going to take our completed thermal bypass valve, the valve and the spring, and we're gonna coat it thick, big time, and transmission assembly lube. And then we're gonna stick the whole shebang up into here and out of the way, just like that. And I even pack a little on top. And that'll hold it into place so it don't just fall out like that while we're trying to put the valve body up. The valve body is heavy enough, you don't have to worry about this. Besides that, once this is glued into place with the transmission lube, we're going to put up the valve body. The one thing you need to pay attention to is this nub right here in the manual shaft. That must line up with your transmission range selector. And I'll do a close-up of that once the valve body's up so you can see how to properly align it. That's the one thing you need to watch out for in the line, and then the rest of it kind of goes up to the alignment pins in here, and then we'll start putting the bolts in. All right, so this is how it looks, and it can get tricky. It can get tricky with this valve right here, I'm telling you. I've done enough of these. All right, here we go. So this is the way the valve's gonna look when you have all that assembly lube on it, and it's like a thick petroleum jelly almost, and it creates like a stiction effect. So it'll actually stick into there and hold it into place. So I'll kind of put the excess up there and around it, and maybe even pack some more up in there around it, and that'll kind of hold it into place for us. Either way, any fluid coming out of there, it will wash that stuff right out. So you want to move it and get your valve body up and into place here before it falls. Now once you're up in here, it's not going to fall out. And we're going to get this out of the way. We're going to get underneath it here and line up right here with our manual valve. And everything else should basically fall into place. I know I'm probably blocking some of this, but we'll start putting in the longer bolts on here. And then we'll put them in by hand with a tool like this. I'll put another one in. Okay, now that the bolts are holding it, we can concentrate on lining this really well. And then there's two pins in the valve body that stick into the case. And that'll help too. Now once a bolt or two is holding up the valve body, nothing's gonna fall out at this point. So we can concentrate on lining the valve over here, the manual valve with the manual shaft. And then there's two pins in the valve body aligned to the case. Kind of move it around a little bit and hold it up. Yep, that looks good. And then we could take a wrench and just snug it up a little bit. That way it doesn't move. Just like that. And it's safe, we can recheck. Hey, everything's aligned, nothing's binding. Everything looks good to go, everything's aligning up. And we can start putting all these bolts back in. And you can kind of just tell where these go. Basically all the open slots on here, all the long ones are the same length. So it's pretty, self-explanatory. There we go. Everything's just so slippery when you're doing this kind of work. You gotta really watch it. You gotta hold on to stuff really tight. This valve body slips out of your hand, hits the ground, it's over. You don't wanna mess around. So have all your tools ready to go to screw them in because it's hard to grip with your hands like this by hand, getting threads in there and holding the valve body. It's a real pain. So at this point, I'll go around and just try to snug these up. Okay, just kind of jump around to them. Just so it's even. You can kind of just tell where they're at on here. And then we'll install the 3 small ones back here, the short ones, back in here. And that goes in the back side of the solenoids here, up into the case. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to torque, 11 of these bolts in sequence, as you can see here. And we're going to torque them to spec, because it's 71 inch-pounds. Don't worry, I'll have this linked down below with everything else that you guys need, so you can just print it out and have it right next to you while you're doing it. Real quick before going any further, after you've torqued down the valve body, or even before, if you're not sure, what you want to do while it's secured up there with 1 bolt or 2 holding in place so it doesn't fall, you can come over here and look. You can see if our transfer seal is in place. You can see how it's lined up perfectly on there. Everything's good to go. The actual valve body is flush against the case right there. And even back here, you'd be able to see it where the solenoids, the molded lead frame goes against the transmission case too. Everything will look like it's aligned and flush. And then you can go ahead and torque it down or even check it afterwards. I always do that post-check. Now here's that close-up of the manual valve that we splined and locked into the trans range sensor earlier. Remember that? It's right there. Well, you need to do the same exact thing to the manual shaft to the manual valve. Just like that. You see that? And when you're done, let me get still here. This should move. See it moving? It shouldn't be bound up at all. And it should move back and forth just a little bit. Either way, if you could spin it like this, it's not bound up. Everything's good to go, and we're setting there just right. Now, what we need to do is install that pass-through sleeve back here. Okay, and it's a little tricky because if you don't do it right, you're going to have transmission issues, big time. So we're going to walk you through that right now. You're going to take your brand new sleeve and you're going to coat it liberally like this, big time, with the trans gel, because these seals are really plush and it's hard to get it all the way in there and then lock it. Now the way you're going to do this is you see that little tab right there in the bottom. That's going to line up with the molded lead frame, and then there is 2 ears, you can't see them right there and right there, that are going to push in and release this lock on here so that you're able to actually push this up and lock it in. And then we're going to do a post-check measurement also. But you see how right now I push up as hard as I can. I cannot push up and lock it or even move it. That's because the sleeve is not pushing in on the retainers in here. There's a metal retainer. So once it's pushed in all the way up here, this will just slide lock right into place, barely any effort at all. And that procedure looks a little something like this. So we're going to take our greased up sleeve, our new sleeve with O-rings on it, and then we're going to come in from the back side here and we're going to put it into the hole, And you can see mine is not just falling in. So we're going to spin it a little bit and try to find the alignment slot on there. And you'll know, because it'll fall right in out of nowhere. There's only one way to put it in there. There it goes, and it falls right in. Now at this point, you should be able to just push in on this sleeve evenly side to side, okay? And then push up on this lock and get it in there. Sometimes they're more difficult, like this one. So what we'll do is we'll put a piece of metal or something like that right there, and then use a pry bar right in the center, dead center. Okay, so we do it evenly, and we'll push in on a little bit while we are releasing the lock. There we go. And that's fully locked in that way. It should slide right up into there just like that, no sweat. And that's how you know that it's fully inserted. As a post check, you want to come in here and take a measurement from the edge of the sleeve to the case. Okay, just like that, you know, as straight as you can get. And it should be right around 15 or 16 millimeters, okay? If it's any more than that, then you know the sleeve is not properly installed. Right there, see around 15.5 to 16 millimeters. That's what you want. This is a very important post check. This will make sure there's no transmission, you know, limp mode or DTCs afterwards from an unseated connector. At this point, you can go ahead and you can take your connector once you find it up in the body here, tucked away. I gotta find mine. You can take it, come over, okay? The locking lever's gonna be up there, and you'll find it just falls in, see that? And then you go like this until it click locks like that. That's it. And that's fully seated and installed. All right, with the hard part over, everything looks good. We can just go ahead and clean the gasket surface on here all the way around. Okay. Get it wiped down like so. And then we're going to do the same thing with the hole for the filter. And this will help so it doesn't fall out while it's just hanging there, because the filters are huge and they like to fall out. Get your bolts ready for the pan. Make sure your pan is ready with the magnet inside. Very important to have that magnet. There we go. It's gonna kind of droop like that a little bit. No big deal. And then we'll get our pan. Line her up. We'll get a few bolts in the bolt holes on each side, so it holds the pan and filter for us. Alright. We're just going to snug these so it holds it. But you want the pan to still be loose. So I'll show you here how it looks. So they're snugged, but I can still move the pan around. See that? And that'll make sure all the rest of these bolt holes line up. So you want to go around the pan and put all the rest of the bolts in by hand, thread or two. Okay? And then we're just going to tighten them in a crisscross pattern. Okay? Just kind of jump around and tighten them. Snug them up, and then we're going to torque them to 98 inch-pounds, and that'll set the pan. And there you have it, molded lead frame replacement on the 6R80 transmission. Thing's beast. It does have a few inherent problems, and this is one of them. So if you take care of this and that bulkhead sleeve seal and that other seal to the pump, you're taking care of a lot of them all at once while in here. And of course the fluid change is also critical. So everything's buttoned back up on here now. At this point, of course, we need to fill the transmission up through this little fill port right here. But that again is another complicated, very critical procedure fluid level, temperature, fluid type, all that stuff. So there's a whole video on that, and I'll link to that down below. I'll see you guys next time.